Hello, Sparkly Beans. My name is Avery. If you're new here, I help folks who are passionate about liberation and justice to find themselves and their roles in an emerging future. And one of the ways I do that is through astrology. So in this series, Practical Astrology 101, we look into some of the fundamental concepts of astrology from a practical, applicable perspective. And we are in the second video of a little mini series within Practical Astrology 101 that is really just focused on the basics. So if you missed the previous video, I will stick it up in the little thing at the top. So you want to start there because we started talking about planets last time, or sorry, we started talking about signs rather, via the concepts of element, modality, and orientation. So I'll reference those concepts in this video. So I would recommend going ahead and checking that out first if you haven't already, and then coming back to this video. And just as a reminder, we're talking about signs now. We will cover planets as well as, wow, my brain just blanked there. What is astrology? Signs, planets, and houses in upcoming videos. So yeah, stay tuned for that and be sure that you subscribe so that you will be able to see those as they come out. Okay, let's get into it. So in this video, we're going to be going through the signs one by one, talking a little bit about each sign, and we're going to be using that framework of element, modality, and orientation to help us sort of see how you might put together the building blocks when forming your own interpretations. So I think it's important, just as a quick intro before we jump into the signs, to keep in mind that astrology is all about interpretation. So I'm going to share some ways that I think about the signs based on the classification framework and then just my astrology practice in general. But you know, my understandings are always evolving, as should yours be. You might find ways in which energies apply or don't apply in your own experience, and keep in mind that a sign is just one part of the picture. And so we're going to talk about the general sort of characteristics of these signs, which are kind of flavors to the astrology, but you know, it's very different, for example, to be someone who has the sun in Aries in their birth chart versus, let's say, Jupiter is transiting Aries in the sky. Right? There's all different ways that these can be applied. So just keep that in mind as we go. And, you know, take what you like and leave the rest. If my interpretations don't make sense to you, you can think about your own and check out other sources. It's always a good idea. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go in the order that starts with Aries. I like to say that that's not the only order that signs can go in, but it does sort of make sense for this to go ahead and use that order. So we're going to start with Aries, and the sign of Aries is a fire sign. It is specifically cardinal fire, if you remember our modalities, and then finally it is a personal sign. If you remember, the first four signs that we're going to cover will all be personal orientation. So what do you think when you think about cardinal fire? You think about a personal sense. Well, I like to think of Aries as it's striking a match. It's you know, it's that initial spark. It's the energy of fire, and specifically initiating fire, and then it's personal initiating fire. So with Aries, you have strong associations with independence, with sort of forging your own path, starting something, particularly, you know, initiating from passion. If you think about the fire element, so, you know, Aries, one of the sort of stereotypes of Aries can be that, like, they can be hot-tempered, and then it can kind of, like, quickly, they move on to the next thing, right? Because it's that starting passion, it's that, like, immediate passion, but it's also, Aries isn't a sustaining energy. because it is that cardinal, right? It wants to start things, and then once the thing is going and rolling along, it wants to move to the next new adventure. Sometimes I have my Venus in Aries, and sometimes Venus in Aries can be a little stereotyped as like, ooh, shiny person, and then move on to the next thing. But it's not entirely false. So there's that real excitement with newness with Aries. It can be an energy of creative initiation, sexual initiation, just passion in general. You might, some archetypes that might apply to Aries can include, it's often a sign that's associated with war. You can think of certainly, a warrior archetype, but since I like to take things from a radical lens, I also think about Aries as, like the concept of trailblazing can come across as like colonial. Aries is associated with the Emperor card in the tarot, and so some of the like shadow associations might tend towards, oh, this is a conqueror, or the pioneer, or all these words, right, that have tons of like racism and colonialism steeped into them. The general, the head of the conquering army, but I don't believe that any sign is trapped to a particular worldview. And so I also think with Aries of like really artists that break a mold. People who are not afraid to jump in there and speak about something they're passionate on. I think Aries, so yeah, again, like it's a starting energy. It's not always like a sustaining energy. So Aries can kind of start fires where they go and inspire and motivate other people. But they're not necessarily going to be super focused on others because it is a personally oriented sign. There is this this sort of like, I'm doing me, and if you like it, that's great, and if you don't, I don't see Aries as an energy that's very sort of like wrapped up in how it's perceived. So that's just some on Aries to get your ideas flowing, get your thoughts flowing. Now let's move on to Taurus. So Taurus is very stark contrast to Aries. Taurus is fixed earth. Again, it's a personal orientation sign. So if you think of the earth element and you think of being fixed and the energy of sustaining something and keeping it moving, I think sometimes Taurus, probably the most common sort of stereotypical thing about Taurus is, oh, they're really stubborn, they're the bull, they're immovable. And while I don't disagree that can sometimes, that kind of being a little too stuck or static could be a part of Taurus, I also think that it's interesting to think about fixity or being fixed, not as not moving, but as sustaining. And so what does it mean when the earth element is operating in a really sustainable fashion? So you start to get to some of the Taurus associations with that, because if your resources are really sustainable, if your like physical tangible world, if you're really focused on sustainability at the core, then you have things like pursuit of quality. So Taurus really is into creature comforts, but also like just high quality things. So like I think of Taurus a lot with like the idea of the sort of expensive purchase that will last you 30 years, the handcrafted, really well made thing. It's very Taurus for me. So it's it's tangible resources, but it's things that are built to last. And it is personally oriented. So again, like a Taurus is very tuned into, it's very important to be tuned into with Taurus energy, personal values, what quality actually means, like personally, what sustainability looks like personally. A Taurus is, you know, like Taurus energy is a like loyal, committed energy, but it needs to be, that commitment and that loyalty is always, I think, rooted in values and a sense of what's important. I think that's pretty much, so yeah, Taurus, like sustainable quality. Also, individual pleasure comes up in Taurus, very much like the sensual, sensory experience of the world. So you're using your senses. You know, earth signs also associated with the body and the physical structures of the body. So you can think about the sensory experiences that are needed to root you in place where you are. You know, a connection to the land can be very Taurus, like building a close personal relationship to the land over time, building a close personal relationship to the physical body over time, strikes me as Taurus. So then we move to Gemini. So with Gemini, we're now in our first air sign, again, still personal, and this is our first mutable. So we've got mutable air with Gemini. So I think mutable air, you probably maybe immediately picture like a breeze or something, you know, gusts of wind. What is air in motion? Air that is moving. So with mutable air, you have associations with the mind and communication, and then how things are, how transition happens, how changes happen, how, like, deciding whether to pivot. So Gemini, if you think of those things together, you have, you know, wanting to get as much information as possible. So always being sort of, Gemini energy is always sort of open to new perspectives, right? It's the twins, and I think I think Gemini is one of the signs that's getting some of the worst rap right now. There's always a sign people love to hate, and I think Gemini is one of those right now. So often I hear, you know, people say like, oh, Gemini, like it's really flighty, or it's you know, can't, like flip floppy, like can't decide. And again, like all signs have shadow sides, and so it's not to say that can't ever come up with Gemini, but it's also, you know, Gemini energy is, to me, well, one, maybe there's something with Gemini around, I think, navigating a world in which we have so much information. There might be other sign energies that are helpful, like maybe Virgo energy, to kind of like refine that information and to narrow it down. But that said, the sheer existence of information that is accessible, that's the key part, right? Accessible to a lot of people, has such a profound effect on our world right now. And I think that is like a Gemini thing. So wanting to have all the perspectives, all the information, being open to sort of different, you know, changing approach, like trying new ways and different ways of processing information, different modalities. I can see with Gemini, there's this like, yeah, desire to know for sure. You know, it is a personal orientation, so there's a lot in Gemini, I think, about like from your personal setting, like all the things that you're taking in to form opinions. They're also, by the way, like a Gemini can be a very social, very humor is often brought up with Gemini, because you do have this like with mutable air an ability to, you know, some people might call it like flitty or flaky, but and easily you could spin that more positive, you know, this ability to kind of circulate around a social situation and talk to many different people and find out about, especially ideas, because Gemini is an air sign, right? So it's not necessarily like finding out everything like deeply about the person, but like finding out different people's ideas and perspectives is a really critical part of Gemini energy. So that's Gemini. And then moving to, oh, I'd also just say like language in general, like, you know, not that every Gemini is going to be multilingual, but I think that there's Gemini energy can come up for me in like the different ways in which language is expressed and the different ways in which language alters perception. I don't know, that just comes through for me as Gemini. So now we move to Cancer, and this is our last personally oriented sign. It is, we're back to another cardinal sign, and this one is water. So I identify pretty strong with Cancer myself because I have Cancer moon and rising very closely conjunct to one another, and I have a very sort of like moon ruled lunar chart because of that. So yeah, Cancer is associated, sign is associated with the moon. So if you think about personal, water, and cardinal, so it is an initiating energy, which I think for a long time with me was a little confusing with Cancer, but I feel like I'm just finally like really starting to get that bit. You know, if you think about water, and you think about feeling and connection and kind of like a heart sense, and you think about the way in which and again, it's personal. So if you think about like your own emotional reaction to things, or the ways in which an emotion, a connection, something can like pop up, and then the sensitivity in that, whether it's the emotion itself being a like sensitive sort of reaction to something, or whether it's just like once you have that experience of newness, sort of a tender, heart-centered newness, the vulnerability that you're putting yourself out there with, and then the way there can be kind of a desire to then retreat into your shell after that. So Cancer is the crab, and you can think of a crab shell. You know, some of the like things people often think about with Cancer and that like crab imagery is, you know, it carries its home on its back, right? So Cancer really cares about home and safety, and like particularly emotional safety, and so that may not be like obvious with a cardinal sign that's an initiating energy, like this desire for safety, but I think you can kind of see it if you consider the idea of new emotions being scary sometimes, and new emotions sometimes we want to like skitter out, and then we want to skitter back into our shell. But once we see new experiences and like have those emotions and new relational experiences, then sometimes that results in wanting to pull somebody back into our shell. So I think there's a lot about with Cancer just about our own getting to know our own emotional patterns, getting to understand, I'll say attachment style, though I might get into that more Scorpio, but attachment style, and just the sort of balance between wanting to be, you know, it's a very like, it can be a very tender, sensitive, nurturing energy, you know, wanting to start new opportunities to care for others. I find that personally, my experience of this is just that I have a very tender being heart. And when I was very little, it was like, hello, new person. Like I initiate relationships with a lot of sort of trust at the beginning, and like wanting to care for people. Sometimes not that great at discerning, right, the right people, but I think that there is, at least in my felt experience of Cancer, that part of Cancer can be, even though it's associated with safety and hiding in the crab shell, it can be because we want to jump out there and we want to, make new connections, and we want to find people to take care of and people who will take care of us. And so, we're able to jump out in the world and like try to find the person, but then we might skitter back a little bit. So yeah, thinking about how we care, how we're cared for, big parts of Cancer. So now we move to our first, we were in the personal signs. Now we're going to move into the interpersonal or social. Now I'm forgetting the word I used in the last one because I've heard a few different, but I'm going to say interpersonal in this one. Signs that are all about our relationships directly with other people. So we first encounter in this orientation Leo. So Leo, we've got another fire sign, and now we're looking at what is fixed fire. So fixed fire and then social or interpersonal. So if we know that, again, fire brings about things like creativity, passion, drive, and if we want to sustain that, if we want to have a fixed, sustainable kind of, keeping the creativity going, keeping the passion going, keeping the visibility going is a really good keyword. Leo is ruled by the sun, so visibility might come up. If we're going to be on the stage all the time, if we're going to be creative, showing our, sharing with others, because again, it's interpersonal, our passions, what's one of the things we might need to sustain that and keep going? Well, it's recognition. It's validation, it's affirmation. So Leo is, often like the sort of stereotypical Leo is the lion, and you kind of think of this like either like maybe a very charismatic leader or like or kind of like diva, very like successful and aware of it, kind of like creative person might be the image that comes to you. Somebody who's always in the spotlight is often what comes up with Leo. But what's interesting is, and I think that interpretation leaves out, is that Leos run quite a range. And so some of the more like, I don't know, the sources that I find a little leaning into stereotypes will say things like, oh yeah, the Leo always needs attention on them, and if they don't have it, they're grumpy, and they need this and they need that. Well, I found that Leo can manifest in that way, but it also can manifest, I think, with deep insecurity and a need for recognition and validation. And I think it's useful to think about where this comes up and in whose chart, etc., with the cultural implications of that. So like, who is allowed to be, who is entitled to be on the stage based on unearned, unjust privilege, and who has a strong longing for recognition and affirmation and validation, and may have a more difficult time finding it because of their situation in life. So I find that Leo, somebody with Leo in their chart, or a lot of Leo in their chart, or going through a Leo transit, can be grappling with what it looks like to feel a need, their vital energy, like fire is like life force, vital energy, the sun. When somebody feels a need to express themselves and to be in relationship, because it is an interpersonal sign, like to express themselves in relationship, to share, and doesn't have an opportunity to do that, or doesn't get good feedback, it's hard to sustain that effort. So So Leo, I think as an energy, you know, it is a bright, passionate, vital, shining energy. And we have to look to the ways in which when Leo energy is restricted or doesn't have that opportunity for affirmation, the ways in which it can look very different, and it can look like really low energy, and it can look like burnout and exhaustion. It can look like somebody really like flinging themselves out looking for acceptance and not getting it, so they get burnout and they get exhausted. Or it can look like somebody just getting stuck and stagnant. So you know, recognition, like the desire for affirmation, recognition, validation, all of us have this. This is a human thing. It's not something to be ashamed of, or to, you know, kind of like call out and stereotype like, oh, Leos are all like this. And I think there's also a real relationship with this energy to, like, I think a healthy Leo energy can be really playful, can be, well, we mentioned like leadership. So that's another thing, is that, like, I think Leo can really lead from passion. It's important for Leo to not get too sort of addicted to the how it feels to have attention on them and to have their own ideas validated, and important to like bring others in. But a really healthy Leo can be an amazing leader. And when I think of Leo energy, I think of how Leo's, I haven't been going through all the tarot, but Leo is associated with, so I can leave a comment if you want a video on tarot astrology, the signs and what tarot cards they go with, because I can do that separately. But with Leo, it's associated with the Strength card, and it has a strong heart connection. We'll always talk about Leo and heart, and cœur, the French word for heart, leading to courage, which we all think of as a lion. So there's tie-ins there, right? The fierce, tender vulnerability of the heart really comes up for me in Leo energy. So then we move to Virgo, and Virgo, we have an earth sign. We have a mutable earth sign. We have, again, it's an interpersonal mutable earth. So there's the little ding to inform us that what we're saying is good. Virgo is one where I actually, I first jumped onto Virgo. I was like, why am I not a Virgo? Because the stereotype with Virgo is often this like optimization and efficiency, and like Virgo loves a good spreadsheet. And that is true. This is not to say that's not true. Virgo energy, though, it's refining, and it's refining. It's, what's the best way to explain this? So if you think about mutable earth, we're back to our tangible resources. We're back to the body, to land, to you know, the tangible product of what we're doing in this world. And mutable signs, again, want to either wrap things up or change direction. Like, tend to want to pivot, want to evaluate, determine, do we keep this in our lives, or do we throw it out, right? Is this serving us? Is it not serving us? And so when you think about the Virgo stereotypes of like making things really efficient and optimizing and trying to, you might think of, I blanked on the tech term, but like, like trying to sort of trim out all the excess and like find the best version of something. But I think it's important to ask why Virgo energy wants that. Like, why is Virgo refining and discernment is a huge term I use for Virgo, you know, discerning. Virgo really understands that you can't go forward with everything. But why do they do that? Well, they do that. Another keyword associated with Virgo is service. So and it is an interpersonal sign again. I think that helps it to come together because they're not just doing it for the hell of it. A Virgo wants other people's lives to be as easy as possible. A Virgo cares about, what is the best system we can all use? What is the, how can I serve others by optimizing their lives, particularly in the physical plane? Or you could expand this to digital. So when I say physical, I don't necessarily mean not digital. A modern interpretation. A Virgo can totally include spreadsheets, but it's like that tangible, it's like the day-to-day. You can think of that, what can we optimize about the day-to-day? So even though a document on your computer may not be tangible, it is very much like a thing you work with, a tool every day. So Virgo is about service. It's about words like optimizing and efficiency, I think, can often be sort of tied to like a specific capitalist ethic. But you can take it outside of that. You could, a Virgo energy can be really good for like coming up with a ritual, for figuring out how to manage time and energy in a way that's really supportive. So all sorts of things. It does not have to be in like a capitalist paradigm. Virgo is also comes up a lot with the body and with sort of ways of figuring out what serves the body. So I'm going to say it that way because I think sometimes people can talk about Virgo in the body in a way that I really don't like, which is like, diet and exercise and, they're really good at sticking to a diet. Well, I feel like that's centered on terrible cultural norms and I don't like it. I think a better way to think about like a really healthy, because that would be a shadow side, like a restrictive Virgo energy might engage in unhealthy behaviors around the body. I think a healthy Virgo energy is really tunes in with, gets close and personal to the body and understands what is serving and what isn't serving. So Virgo energy might totally be involved, for example, in like a really supportive, relationship with like a holistic practitioner, or, a health coach that really like pulls in all aspects. Might come up with, the tarot card associated with Virgo is the Hermit, which is interesting because I realize Virgo is an interpersonal sign, so like why would it be the Hermit? But there is this sense of like focusing on the immediate and the everyday and what is here right now. And a Virgo will help you find what you might have been missing, where you're like working on, you're working towards a goal, you're doing whatever, and you don't see what's wrong. And the Virgo can say, oh, well, like if you tweaked this about your day and then this other thing. A really beautiful energy. As are all of the energies we're talking about. I could just say that for everyone. But let's move now into Libra. So we're halfway around. So if you're looking at a chart wheel, you may have noticed we've gotten from Aries I put it at the top because mine's think of it as the top. I have a Cancer rising, so it's the top for me, but you could think of it here. Getting from Aries to Libra, we're now halfway around. So Libra is the other side. Of Aries. So I'll probably mention that for each of the signs as we go through, just because I find that the polarity or the opposition is really helpful to work with, and I'll probably do a whole video. I'm obsessed with polarities and I find them to be really supportive in working with the signs and understanding that they're not opposites, they're incorporation of a dual energy. I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but I will mention that, and if folks are interested, again, just leave a comment below. So let's talk about Libra. Libra is air. Libra is cardinal again. So remember, when we have an opposition between two things, they're always going to be in the same modality. So Aries was cardinal fire. Now we're down at the bottom of my chart. We're now at cardinal air, and we're again on an interpersonal sign. So if you think about air, I think the cardinal is interesting. Like, in some ways the cardinal with Libra is also a little hard for me to grasp, because I think about like initiating air and like, how does air start? Well, it seems like, well, it's an idea maybe, or it's something. But then when we add in the interpersonal element, Libra is very interested in fact, we can also look at Gemini, like we can contrast this energy to Gemini. Because we talked about how Gemini pulls in all the information, right? And then Libra is also really like looking outward to get information or to consider information. But with a Libra, it is it's really about balancing and harmonizing. So like I think of Gemini energy can hold a lot of things to be true at the same time, like absolutely masters of the dialectic and like being able to say, no, this is all true. Libra, we start saying, okay, but like, how do we balance these things and how do we find harmony among the pieces? So if a Libra is really like focused on the interpersonal and on others, they're also like specifically focused on the group dynamic and how and others who are in relationship to each other. If we think of it that way, Libra wants to understand everyone's sort of like 30-second argument or idea, or like get what they're I shouldn't say 30-second argument, because I think a Libra can also totally like listen to the whole thing, but what the key here is like they're really looking for, I'm trying to think how to say this in the best way. Like they're really looking, so Libra's associated with the Justice card in the tarot, and balance and the scales is the Libra symbol. And so it's like, how do we take into account everything that's here and then get to the best possible outcome, even though that outcome is not necessarily going to be perfect. And I read recently something that was really enlightening to me about Libra, because I will admit that this energy is one of the harder ones for me to grasp. When I used Placidus, which is a house system, don't worry about it. We'll go into it with the house video. But when I use that system, my Libra and Aries are both what we would call intercepted. Again, don't worry about what it means too much, but basically it's a sign that I have trouble like accessing and understanding and like accessing in my own life, and both Aries and Libra. And Libra, I found, was I had sort of misunderstood it as being a sign of just like people pleasing. And I thought like, oh, Libras are great. Like Libras are the people. It was actually pretty hilarious, because I was like, oh, Libras are the people who are going to like take care of me and nurture me, because they don't care about themselves. They just care about everybody else. Like the opposite of Aries. Like if Aries only cares about themselves, which isn't totally true, but like Aries tends to focus on themselves, and then Libra focuses on everyone else, then I want to be around Libra. But what's hilarious about that to me is that, and maybe what I couldn't see because of the natural square between Libra and Cancer, where I reside, is that it's actually a Cancer who's probably going to be that person, right? Like my longing and desire for somebody who's just going to like prioritize me because I'm tired is actually another person like me. We just prioritize each other in like a mutual flowing way. A Libra is not necessarily, so I read something that kind of like helped me understand this, that a Libra is not necessarily somebody who's going to take care of and nurture you, because it is cardinal. It is initiating energy. So it's not necessarily like staying in there and sustaining for the long haul, but and it's not necessarily nice, you know. Libra energy can feel even like off-putting if a Libra kind of takes several points of view or ideas. Remember, air, so we're thinking about like ideas, communication, you know, several arguments, and then says, great, the best thing for the group is actually that you, like, your deal does not support the group. So you're actually more supported by keeping your mouth shut, right? Libra would not be afraid to say that necessarily. Or sometimes the shadow of this can be finding a common ground that nobody's really satisfied with, but it's like the best for everyone as a group. So Libra can be really helpful in group dynamics and impartiality, when impartiality is needed, when mediation is needed, when diplomacy is needed. Bring in a Libra. But also don't misunderstand Libra as being sort of the one to like then take care of you and emotionally nurture and process, because they probably have moved on to the next sort of situation they can resolve, or conflict, or argument. I want to note, by the way, that as I'm speaking about each sign, you know, I feel really energized. When I get to Libra and I'm talking about, I feel this kind of like tension, like maybe I don't fully have it. So everyone's always learning. Like, I think it's important to normalize this. And even though like I've been practicing and studying astrology very intensely for, you know, over 5 years now, and have worked with charts and, you know, have played with Libra energy. Like I think it's always evolving. It is for every sign, but I'm just like, I want to call that out in case anybody's like, I'm a Libra and that doesn't resonate. I'd love to hear what you think about Libra below. Okay, great. So let's move into the next sign, which is Scorpio. So I love Scorpio. I'm clearly a little bit water biased. I have some placements. Actually, if you were born in 84, 85, roughly, there's a certain cohort of people, and this was mentioned the other night actually on Diana Rose Harper mentioned it on a live, which if you're not familiar with the work of Diana Rose Harper, excellent, amazing astrologer, check out, I highly recommend, especially if you're interested in the intersection here between like liberation and justice and astrology. Really, really great person to check out. But Diana does a live chat for patrons, and which again, recommend her Patreon. And one of the things that came up that I was like, oh right, that's totally true, is that the generations around me, there is a certain group of people, a cohort of people, where we all have Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node hanging out in Scorpio. And I think Diana said something like, oh, you should just, if you have a friend in these years, like give them a hug or something. They're going through it. But yeah, so there's a lot of intensity with Scorpio that people in my generation may relate to. But even if you're not in that cohort, let's just talk about Scorpio. So Scorpio is water, fixed, and Scorpio, we continue to be in the interpersonal. I need to like make sure I don't miss it when we switch. So Cancer gets us to, and then interpersonal is Leo, Virgo. Yeah, okay, so we're about to switch. I always have to check that one because it's Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. Yes, so this is our last interpersonal. So let's think about, what does that look like? Fixed water, interpersonal. Well, with water signs, I really like to, well, any of the signs, but I particularly like to do this with water signs. I like to think about manifestations of the element itself. So like with, it's funny, with Cancer, I guess I think more of the symbol of the crab, and I tend to think about things like tidal pools. But you could also think, if you just thought initiating water, you might think about waterfalls. Would be a great like mental image for the sort of like sensitivity of, like, sometimes kids are just like, ah! I had one of those last night where it's just like, oh, we're tears now, right? So Cancer, you might think of that, you might think of a spring or a source, right? And then we'll get to Pisces. Always think of the ocean with Pisces. But Scorpio, I like to think with fixed water of like, it could be a pond, it could be a lake, but deep. I like to think of like real deep water, because Scorpio, it's fixed so it can hang out a while. It needs to be in and like stay in an energy. It's a sustaining thing. You know, people will often harp a little on the shadow side of like how Scorpio, kind of like Taurus, right? So here we're back to Scorpio is, so we said Aries and Libra. Now we got Scorpio as opposite Taurus. So with Taurus, you often hear, oh, Taurus are stubborn and can get stuck. Same with Scorpio, you'll hear words like obsessed or intense, severe, extreme, right? That Scorpio can get kind of like bogged down. But again, an unhealthy version of the sign. It's not the sign. So a lot of people, I think Scorpio is maybe moving out of the sign most stereotyped, and now it's Gemini, but I feel like Scorpio was in there for a while too. And a lot of times I think people will think about Scorpio and just be like, oh my god, it's like emo dramatic kid. Okay, but I adore Scorpio energy because, again, it's fixed water, so it's like, what do we find when we're willing to keep diving and to spend some time in the depths? What's underneath? Scorpio loves to dig. I actually don't know much about scorpions, but I want to say scorpions dig in the sand. Is that? I don't know. I'm not from a place with scorpions, but you might think of that. It's a very deep kind of, it can be an intense energy because, like, what is more intense than the bottom of the ocean or the bottom of a body of water? You could think of like a very deep well as well. Underwater or underground water maybe. So it's interpersonal. And with water, again, we're thinking about emotion. We're thinking about relating the layers. You know, Scorpio is a sign that certainly can relate to and investigate trauma, unhealed wounds. Investigation is a big theme of Scorpio. And so if you think of it interpersonally, so I said I would mention attachment styles again, and here I am. I think there's definitely something with Scorpio and the way they attach to other people, because it can be a sort of wanting to like sustain the depths of emotion of somebody and wanting to like really get their people, wanting to like deeply understand and like maybe talk about things you're not comfortable with, right? Because they want this emotional depth. It's a strong like, emotional intimacy, and this feeling of like sharing our trauma can sometimes be part of that. As someone with a South Node in Scorpio, like I feel this because the South Node being a point that's kind of like a comfort point is that or like a habitual place, is that I can be very comfortable and habitual and like default to wanting to dive in with someone and like really go, you know, it's like traumatic oversharing is a problem I'll sometimes have because I'm just like, yes, let me tell you about my deepest trauma. And if you get stuck too much in that and don't incorporate the North Node, then, you know, it can be kind of self-defeating. But yeah, so like trauma can come up, attachment style, the patterns, the like holding patterns emotionally that you can get into with other people can be a Scorpio thing. The, you know, if you think about, again, like over time, interpersonal, like how do patterns develop and kind of spool out? That's what I'm doing with my hands here. Between two people or between a group of people. And then what are the like ways in which trauma or even just memory, if we want to give it a more neutral connotation, like gets stored for us, and then the ways that gets activated by other people. All of those things feel very Scorpio to me. And it certainly can be also associated with things like sex and death, right? Like the more uncomfortable taboo topics, because Scorpio does want to go deep. It includes things that may be a lot to some people. You know, a brief personal anecdote is that both my parents are Scorpio, and the first two people, was that girlfriend? Yeah, I think the first two people I dated, high school girlfriend and college boyfriend, as I will call them forever, I'm pretty sure they were both Scorpio, and my parents are Scorpio, and I used to be like, I don't get Scorpio because these are very different people. Is a good example of how the whole chart is very important, but like it's also, you know, the ways that this kind of depth can manifest can be very different. So like I'm not going to tell you anything about specific people, but like I've seen some Scorpios thrive on like gossip and just like wanting to like know all the information and can like be really dramatic. And then other Scorpios really have it like all inside, and so you can't see it. You know, just because it's social doesn't mean it's talkative. It can be about the patterns that come up and the activations that come up from being in relationship that may be internalized, if that makes sense. So that's some Scorpio. Now we're at Sagittarius, and we're nearly at an hour, so hopefully we'll get through the last few here. But now we're into our transpersonal signs. So now we're talking about not the relationships one-on-one or in a group necessarily, but the collective as a whole, and like bigger meaning and picture and stuff. Meaning, I say, because when I think of Sagittarius, I immediately jump into meanings and beliefs. And so Sagittarius is mutable fire, and again, transpersonal. So when you think about mutable fire, you think about that drive, that passion, that energy, that creativity, and then you think about how it's redirected, how it finds. I think what's, you know, sometimes it's hard for me to like Sag is mutable. Sometimes I want it to be fixed, but one way I can think about it is almost like the shaper of direction is part of what mutable energy can do, and particular signs like Sagittarius especially. I think with Pisces it feels much more like just like relaxing into like whatever comes up. With Sag it feels more directed to me, in the sense that, you know, the arrow, the archer is associated with Sagittarius. Is that when Sagittarius is onto something, they can get really excited about it and like moving in that direction, and then trying to shape and help guide others in that direction. And then they can totally, though, adapt and find something new and find a different path, and try different things. But when they're on a particular path, I think they seem to be on it and then maybe like abruptly turn. I'm curious if other, like, this is another one with Libra that I would say I'm particularly interested in your experiences, because Sagittarius is also one of those signs that like I feel like I don't fully, I'm always like trying to get more of it. But it is a very like go out there and find what's possible energy. It's associated with Jupiter, or ruled by Jupiter, I should say. Expansion and like a Sagittarius. I think Sagittarius energy is the energy that wants the theory or the movement or the belief or the idea, wants, like, gets passionate about something, because it's not an air sign, right? So it's not necessarily an idea, but like gets passionate about something, which often can be an idea or theory or framework or a belief or a group or a movement, and then wants to see, I already said like help people towards it. Yeah, like wants that to be the thing, right? Like wants that to be the thing that makes change. Because as a mutable sign, Sag has a hunger, I think, really like a hunger for, there's got to be something more, there's got to be something better. And so what I think sometimes happens is that they grab something, are with that energy for a while, and then if they start seeing something better again, right, like on the right, or maybe they decide that this thing isn't the solution, but this thing is, or maybe this thing is still helpful, but we need to add this component. So it may be, like one shadow side could be a kind of like overzealous, like when they're on a thing, trying to pull everything into a thing, whether it suits them or not. But again, it comes from this passion for humanity that is really beautiful. Another, like, Sagittarius are, I think, generally like stereotyped as being fairly social and sort of like social butterfly and all over the place, and like a party animal maybe. Which, like, yeah, I mean, you know, I think mutable fire, I can see that, because the jumping around of the passions. It's transpersonal though, so I'm like, I can't quite fit that interpretation into my framework, but I'll mention it because it is a common thing that's mentioned with Sagittarius. Like, again, coming back to the metaphors, and like think about fire, and the way fire spreads. It can think of Sagittarius and like the way that something leaps, passion can leap. You know, a Sagittarius who's like really fired up about something can bring a lot of people in. but also doesn't necessarily have to. And so like a Sagittarius is described as an extroverted sign, but I could totally see Sagittarius energy coming up with somebody who's more introverted, where it's really about that fire for the collective, but not necessarily engaging directly with the collective is a possibility. But, you know, Sagittarius loves to learn. So again, it's opposite Gemini. So Gemini is like pulling in all the information. Sagittarius is like, I got this one and I want to work with this one right now. Okay, so now we move to Capricorn. Capricorn opposite Cancer. So it's on my descendant, which is the opposite side of your rising sign. And Capricorn is Earth, Cardinal. So it's our last cardinal sign we'll talk about. Cardinal, Earth, and again, transpersonal. So Capricorn, the word that always comes up is building, builders, right? There's a tenaciousness. If you think about initiating Earth, right? Who's going to get the project off the ground? Who's going to literally just like start doing it, right? Taking the action, like, okay, we need a plan, a framework, right? Capricorn's going to come up. Capricorn's going to like make a list and delegate. Although they might delegate. Capricorn also like is just a really hard worker, and like that's that like that physical initiation, that tangible initiation often shows up in just they are doing the work. They're not delegating, they're just doing it, right? They you know, I feel this energy sometimes or I would in my old job where I would just like, you know, I'm not going to explain to you, I'm going to do it, right? But it's not selfish, right? Because it's transpersonal. It's a very like, Capricorn wants to, I think, build things for a better future, for the world. So it's a very like, you know, how can I benefit everyone by building something that will serve them? And sometimes Capricorn risks burnout. Sometimes Capricorn risks working too hard, not incorporating the Cancer side of the polarity and the need for care and nurturing. But both of these signs can totally burn out, right? I think Cancer can get really emotionally burnt out, really burnt out on taking care of others. I think Capricorn can get really burnt out on doing the work. I don't want to oversimplify Capricorn because I feel like it's really, oh yeah, they're hard workers. But other things like discipline comes up, which is interesting because it is a cardinal sign. It's not a fixed, it's not like a sustaining energy. But I do think Capricorn can often like, they build the whole thing. Like they get it up to the point where it's maintenance mode and can be run by other people and then they go to the next thing. Capricorn can also totally be a leader. Leadership kind of energy, can be, I think Capricorn's often associated with like conservatism. Well, sometimes Cancer and Capricorn both can get associated with conservatism. I think it could be, but I don't think it has to be. There's also really something there in Capricorn around like tradition. So even though it's a cardinal sign, I think with the Saturn rulership, the fact that Saturn rules that sign, there is very much a connection to like past and future, and to creating tangible things, maybe even manifesting things to carry on something that was already started. Could come up in Capricorn. Yeah. So then we go to Aquarius. Aquarius is air. Aquarius is, again, transpersonal, and Aquarius is fixed. So when we look at this energy, it's also, if you're tracking around along the oppositions, Aquarius is opposite Leo. So when we think about Aquarius, fixed air, again, this is one where I was like, fixed air, that doesn't really like tell me much about Aquarius. I'm just like, it's just the atmosphere, like I don't get it. But if you think about air beyond the metaphor, if you think about communication, information, and like fixed, and again, remember, it's not just being stuck, fixed, sustaining. So like, what are the ideas that can sustain us, that can last? Aquarius is often the future is brought up with Aquarius. And I think, you know, Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius in the traditional scheme, Hellenistic astrology scheme. And Capricorn, we often think about the past, and Aquarius, we often think about the future. And I don't think it's a perfect binary, but it's worth mentioning because there is this, you know, Aquarius is often seen as kind of the outsider and the rebel and the like, does anyone, like, I have these ideas, like, does anyone get them? Because they're often really ahead of their time. And while that may seem like, again, like, why isn't that cardinal? I think the thing that feels fixed about it is that ahead of their time, they often, an Aquarian energy can be about visioning and like coming up with these ideas that are actually really sustainable and lasting and will work really well in the future. But when you bring them up now, they may seem like weird and wacky and out there, right? It is very much like transpersonal, very oriented towards the betterment of everyone. So Aquarian energy can be kind of like, I have this new invention, this new thing, this new whatever, and, you know, my Aquarian brain sees how this benefits everyone, and then it's like, how do you communicate that? So yeah, just like weirdness comes up a lot. It's interesting to think of the Leo Aquarius because being opposite each other, because both of these, there's this interaction with recognition and validation, and Aquarian energy is very much like, I don't need that, but I do, right? Because we're human, and so yeah, I think the Aquarius maybe is less likely to admit it. The Leo might seek it more openly, but either way, there is this, how it's received does come up on both those sides. The other thing with Aquarius is it's associated with the star card and in the tarot, and so I feel like a real hopeful energy around Aquarius, but also like a healing energy. And I think it's the healing in like being unique and weird and being yourself. To me, it can really come up with Aquarius, because I think there's a collective benefit to more people being their weird, unique selves. Okay, and now finally we get into Pisces. So Pisces, you may know I'm very Pisces. I have a Pisces Sun, Pisces Mercury. Pisces midheaven, which indicates that my sort of like impact on the world is Piscean. You can let me know if you think that's true or not. But I very much relate to this energy. So I mentioned earlier Pisces, the ocean, is something I think of with Pisces. Pisces, the fish is the symbol. So you're looking at mutable water, transpersonal. So it's very flowy. Like if you think about, you know, water moving as it needs to, moving water, again, waves, tides, like the Pisces is an energy is very in tune with constant change. So things are always changing. It's fluid, it's adaptable. I think it's really like with Pisces, I like if you look at Virgo Pisces, which are opposite each other, like Virgo, I get the real like cutting things out to get the best kind of final result feeling of mutability, the like constantly pursuing something a little bit better. With Pisces, I get more of a sense of just like, what even is reality? Like, so instead of bolting down the thing, it's like just being with it, letting it, you know, like letting it happen. Pisces energy as doula has come up, and it's part of why I chose the term change doula as something that I do, is it's a steward. Pisces is stewarding us from the end of the cycle to the beginning of the cycle. Of course, there is no end in the beginning in a circle. But Pisces is joining that circle. Like Pisces is an energy of sort of guiding people, like guiding humanity through cycles. And so I think you can imagine the ocean, like the idea of just like the tides carrying, might resonate. It's a very imaginative, dreamy kind of energy, because you have this sort of being in your own like emotional waters and the way that emotions come and go, but also I think the spiritual significations of water really come up in here, like being with the flow and like universal spirituality, like thinking about the ways in which we are all connected and all universal and all part of the same thing, and then how we all sort of move and flow together. And so like Pisces can be really in touch with their emotions, really like can be emotionally volatile. I've definitely had that like emotional volatility come up with my Pisces experiences. But also like can really think outside the box, because it's not about thinking, right? It's water, and sort of find the ability to like go with things. Sometimes, you know, some of the shadow sides, like addiction, comes up a lot with Pisces. I think just like the challenge of Pisces energy confronting sort of capitalist reality can be really harsh. It's so not that. Like, I don't think any of the signs are capitalist, by the way, but like that can be a really tough relationship. Piscean energy is very like down with uncertainty, but then when you're expected to like measure things and be certain, then sometimes that's a hard interface. And so, you know, turning to things like addiction, turning to martyr energy comes up sometimes with Pisces. And I've had that as well. Like, because there's such a comfort with letting go and renunciation and, you know, death, metaphorical or literal, comfort with everything being a cycle and nothing being permanent, sometimes I think you can fall into martyrdom in that way. But yeah, so that's Pisces. So that completes our signs. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was helpful. You know, I'll have timestamps below, so keep this as a reference. We will be moving through the series next month, and I would love it if you got something out of this, if you found value. You know, I offer stuff like this totally freely available because I really want to do that, and I'm so happy that folks have access to it. So I'd love it if you share with folks that you know who maybe are a little curious about astrology, have mentioned astrology, you know, just drop this video over. But also I want you to know that I do this work through the radical belief that it will be sustained through folks who have the capacity to support and do find value. So if this is something where you think, gosh, I got something out of that, I could have paid for a class and I didn't, then, you know, think about what value it had to you and what value you're able to contribute. And if that's none, then I so happily welcome you here with no expectation. And if that is greater than 0, then you can check out below. There's a link to my Patreon, which is the best way to support me, an ongoing way, that all the way from $1 up. So you can just choose, you know, what feels right to you. And I will mention that if you are getting value out of my work, I am closing the founders tier soon. So I have this opportunity for early supporters to recognize your early support. That as long as you stay a supporter after signing up before, or I should say by March 2nd, you get some special perks that I have for my higher level contributors, just to recognize the sustaining nature of the contribution to this work, and how that meets my needs. So all my content is freely available, but I do a couple little extras for that level. And I'm offering those to the founders tier, which is just $10 a month. So normally you would get these perks at 20 and up. You can get in, and it will close forever. So if you want to get in on this, the deadline is March 2nd. Go ahead and do it now, because you'll forget. You know you will. Check out the Patreon link below. There's a lot of more information about the funding model and why I do what I do and how you can support it. But basically, the founders tier is that opportunity to get on some special perks. You'll get a quarterly video, which is the only exclusive content for that tier. But one little piece of exclusive content, because I want you to feel like you're on the Queer and Magical AF board. And so you'll get a quarterly video with sort of energies of the season. I'll be channeling, I'll be pulling cards, I'll be looking at the chart of the moment, all that sort of fun stuff. And you'll also get a little behind the scenes into my business. So yeah, I would love for you to join that. You'll also get discounts, early access to offerings, first stab at an advice column that I'm running through my newsletter. So all sorts of goodies. I also just encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. That email list is where you're going to get the first information on whatever's happening, coming out in my world. And And you can totally get all the content for free. So that link is also available down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Practical Astrology 101.